Louisiana Legends is made possible by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Louisiana. This important program series enables us to discover, through the accomplishments of our fellow Louisianians, the unique character of a state so proudly served by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Louisiana for 60 years.
Governor, your brother Marion made an interesting quote, and I want to give it to you and ask you to comment on it. He is an introvert trying to prove to the world that he is an extrovert. Does that sound fairly accurate? Is that...
That's surprisingly, but basically correct. While our appearance and people assume absolute extroverts, but really, basically, there's an insecurity about them and a desire to be to reflect an introvert aspect of their life.
After being governor of your state for 4 years, which won't be repeated for the next 1,000 years, there can't be many insecurities left in Edwin Edwards.
Well, I'm really not insecure. I just, on occasions, just like to be away from it all. You get to where there's just too much pushing and pulling, demanding, pleading, begging, crying. And on occasions you begin to say, man, if I could just get away. And that's why I like to raise cattle, because the cattle never complain and they never beg. And
they don't
never
want a job.
They don't want a job. That's a good way of putting it. And they're not interested in a road, and they don't have a brother, sister, cousin, or somebody they want to get out of jail.
Governor, let's start this interview at the very end. On June 6th, you dropped the mother of all statements on the legislature and on the 4.5 billion people whom you've governed for so many years, almost a quarter of a century. You said that was it, and that you were not going to seek a staggering 5th term. Every theory that's possible to advance was advanced, from impending fatherhood on down. Why don't you share with us on public television what made Edwin Edwards finally check it out?
Of course, there are a number of reasons. I'm 67 years old. I've been governor now in unprecedented 4 terms, and I really have appreciated the opportunity of serving the people. But I have gotten to the point where I just think it's time to move on to something else, and I want to do something else with the rest of my life. Now, let me say this. One of the catalyst, or one of the straws, so to speak, that broke the camel's back was the inability that I had just 2 weeks before of getting the legislature to pass a tax on hazardous waste. One would think that a politician in the legislature would be ashamed to be for hazardous waste, yet they are so subject to lobbying pressures and the pressures of people that walk up and down the corridors of the legislature, that there's a growing number of people in the legislature with whom you cannot really reason, who do not share any concern about the overall public interest. It's what small group of special interest people get to them. And that really concerned me, because I could see the deterioration of the legislative process against the public interest. And the other thing is, simultaneously with all that, an opportunity has arisen, which will be learned later on, which is something that I want to pursue.
Now there, of course, you're playing with us.
I don't mean to do that. It's just simply if it were made public now, I think it would inhibit the process and make it more difficult to accomplish what I'm interested in doing. But I do want to say that another reason that I made the announcement this early is that I felt that I owed it to other candidates who were waiting to run if I didn't run, to give them an early opportunity to make the decision, and also to my supporters. I did not want to lead them for another 10 months into the belief that I was going to be a candidate, deprive them of the opportunity to seek out support in another camp, knowing all the while in my heart of hearts that I wouldn't make the race. And I just didn't think it was fair to them. I would have been better served had I waited till next year at this time to make the decision, because there's this lame duck syndrome that I have to live with. But I just thought that in fairness and in basic honesty, and I like to believe for all that's been said about me, at least I'm honest and upfront with people.
Governor, now I've got to ask you this. There's any possibility that you might leave office before your term is up?
None that I can think of. That certainly is not part of the scenario.
It is not. I want to get into some tough questions because this is a unique opportunity for the citizens of Louisiana to have some insight into you who've, well, been the dominant influence in most of our lives. You're gambling. You're enjoying gambling. What's the origin of that? Where did that come from? I mean, you're from rural Volz Parish, the son of sharecroppers, real poor people.
Well, I grew up in a very poor environment. My father was a very staunch conservative Presbyterian who abhorred tobacco, alcohol, and gambling. He also disliked politics. And as you know, I never smoked and I never drank. Never ever, and I know a lot of people don't believe that.
Nor take a pill of any kind.
And don't take any kind of medication or drugs, anything like that. But I'm a risk taker. You know, I had to be. I came from this poor environment, and I wanted to be somebody and to do something. And in order to do that, I had to take risk. And I can recall the first time I went to Las Vegas in the late 50s, I won $35. And I thought I had just struck gold because that was a monumental sum of money in those days for me, a young attorney practicing law in Crowley. And through the years, on occasion, I do gamble. I'm not a gambler, if I may make a play on words, any more than I'm a cowboy because I ride horses, or a musician because I like to listen to people play the guitar, or listen to a band, or a poet because on occasion I write poetry. It's just something that I do as a pastime, which I enjoy doing. But, you know, I only gamble where it's legal. I gamble within my means. I have never failed to pay a gambling debt. And I do that on an average probably 3 times a year, and have been doing it for 30 years. It is not something new in that sense. It has become very widespread as a result of the passage of gambling legislation that occurred while Buddy Romer was governor of Louisiana.
Governor, you just dropped another little mini bomb that you on occasion write poetry. Do you recall anything that you've written?
Oh, yes.
Would you say one? Saw part of one?
Well, I remember one that I wrote in which it ended with saying, "May you never know a lonely heart, and cherish our meeting from the start. And may the fate that crossed our ways bring us together on future days." I remember that.
This is quite extraordinary. You catch me not forgotten now the next 20 questions.
Let's say something else surprised you. I can quote almost verbatim the entire poem Maud Muller, which would take about 6 or 7 minutes time to do. I learned it when I was in the 9th grade.
Governor, let's get on to something a little tough. Those 2 trials that you went through in '85 and '86 in federal court in New Orleans with Mr. Volz, who also aspires to be governor these days, how did those trials affect you? Were you frightened? Was it a...
I was never frightened because I knew what had happened, and I knew there was no possibility of a conviction. What angered me was this Republican political prosecutor being willing to do that to me, knowing what it was going to do to the state in taking the governor away from his office for that period of time. And, you know, the fact that the first trial ended in 11-1 for acquittal, and yet he made an unprecedented move to insist on a second trial where all 12 jurors this time agreed there was no evidence, showed how politically motivated it was. It was such a bad case that in the second trial, we didn't offer a line of testimony, a single piece of paper, anything at all in our defense. We let him do everything he wanted to do and then rested as he did, and the jury came back unanimous, not guilty. It was a absolutely pure political thing.
Did that experience embitter you?
In a way, yes. It embittered me that there are people who have that power in this system and who are willing to use it. Incidentally, the Republican Party later repudiated him. He was removed from his job and is now living a life of benign non-existence.
You've never, politicians get different tags because those of us who play the game know them. You've never been considered a mean or vindictive man, even at all the years that you've been in power.
That's one thing that I'm very proud of. I never did anything to hurt anybody. Now, I have to say on occasion things that I did to help people incidentally hurt others. You can't take a man off of a board and put somebody else in. The guy that you put in is helped. The fellow that has to go off is hurt, possibly. But the motive was not to take him off, but to put the guy that I wanted on. So, but nothing that I have ever done in my life, either personal or as a lawyer or as a politician, was calculated to hurt people. And I feel very comfortable about that. And I think that's one of the reasons, although many people don't like me as a politician, people do not dislike me as a person, as far as I can tell, because I do not have a vindictive bone in my body. I'm respectful to everybody. I try to understand everybody's position in life. And from the janitor to the chairman of the board, I try to recognize people for their individual worth.
Is politician a bad word?
Absolutely not. It has its root, a word which deals of people. Politician, politics relates directly to people. And if you keep it in the concept of politicians serving people, and I like to think that's what I've done, and I believe that my success at the polls verifies that, then politician is not a dirty word. Now, it is a dirty word in the sense that many people use it to have a connotation of something bad. But after all, everything that's happened in this country happened because of politicians. The Constitution was written, the government was formed, the courts were established, the roads were built, the schools were built, the institutions for the mentally insane, the prison system, everything that is of importance to people in America was done by politicians.
Now, Governor, you have had an ongoing battle, as has every other person who holds power, but you've had a real one with the press. What is your assessment? Is the press failing in its duties? Is it? You tell your side.
Well, in my 40 years in public life, I've had only 4 or 5 reporters, I'm talking about working press, whom I felt had deliberately misrepresented things or lied about me. My problems have been with the columnists and with the editorial writers, who basically know not whereof they speak. They will write today an article about what should be done in South Africa, although they've never been in South Africa. They always pontificate about what should be done in government, although none of them have ever served in government. And I take umbrage to that, because people like that got no business making those decisions. I often say that I don't believe in governments owning newspapers, but I'd much prefer to have that than newspapers owning government. And those of us who are in government who will not cater to the press end up being criticized by the press. But I think it's important to the people that a public official remind himself daily that we're not here to represent or to curry favor with the press. We're here to serve the people. And the more the editorial writers and the columnists criticize me, the more I know I'm serving the common good.
Governor, I want to go to a very personal question. In 1983, your brother Nolan, whom you loved very much and who it was my pleasure to know, was murdered by a client whom you had pardoned from prison. This must have affected you ferociously.
Horribly. The young man had been a drug addict. Nolan was his friend and had represented him when he was found guilty. 3 months before he was scheduled to be released from prison, Nolan asked me to release him because he thought that he had rehabilitated himself. While he was in prison, incidentally, my brother Nolan took care of his wife and his children, supported them on a monthly basis to keep the wolf away from their doors. The young man got out of prison and apparently, we assume, got back on drugs and got angry at my brother one day in his office. We assumed because Nolan would not lend him any money to buy drugs, pulled a gun out and shot him and then killed himself. And I was in the middle of a campaign, and you know, you never expect anything like that to happen. It always happens to somebody else's brother. But it happened to me, and it just literally took the starch out of me, because up until then, I had no tragedies in my family. My father had died, but he was 76 years old, and we knew he was in bad health. We expected it, but my children were all in good health. My siblings were all in good health. We did not have any of the horrible things that haunt so many Americans and families today. We were very fortunate people. And this was the first real tragedy in my life, and it really took the starch out of me.
Did you consider at all getting out of the race, just stopping?
Yeah, yes, I did. I did while I was at the funeral. But, you know, it was such a large turnout of people from all walks of life. It was the largest funeral ever had in Acadia Parish. As I stood in that receiving line and for hours, on endless hours, and heard the comforting words of people, I realized that I would not be faithful to my brother's memory if I did not continue with the campaign.
Governor, you have been in the eye of a storm for now 22 years. Pressure has to be incessant, day and night. You do not drink, you do not take tranquilizers, and I know these things for a fact. How do you hold on to Edwin Edwards and your sanity, really?
Well, first, at the risk of somebody sneering at me, I'm very comfortable with what I do and say. I have on occasion made mistakes, but basically I have been forthright and honest with people and honorable, and I don't worry about the consequences. Sometimes I have to make hard decisions, but I make them and I go on about it. Second, I'm a very healthy person. And third, probably the blessing of my life is that I can go to sleep. You know, some people retreat to a bottle or to drugs,
yes,
or to violence or escape in seclusion. In my case, no matter what my problems are or how wrenching they are, 10 o'clock at night, I just go to bed and get over with and go to sleep. I wake up at 7 in the morning and start over. And I think that's one of the things that saved me from probably insanity or certainly from having ulcers.
You're not a worrier?
No, don't worry at all. But on the other hand, I don't postpone things, I don't procrastinate, and I don't misrepresent. And, you know, while it's hard at times and I pay a hard price for it, I just let it out and get it done, and then I forget about it.
Governor, over the 22 years that you've served as the chief executive of this state, have there been any serious assassination attempts? Did you
only one.
What can you tell us just a little?
A fellow was intercepted at the airport here, and he was later convicted, carrying a weapon. And I don't recall the details, but it was when there was a great deal of this very extreme student movement, Black Panther type things, these really motorcycle gang sort of things. And he was a member of one of those organizations, and he was being watched by the FBI. And when he got to the Baton Rouge airport, they apprehended him, and he had a piece of paper with my name and address on it. And while he never admitted it, the assumption was made that he had been sent in to assassinate me. Now, we have received coop calls, crank calls on occasion, but surprisingly few. And, you know, as considering how controversial I am, I'm really surprised that it hasn't been more serious than that through the years.
Does having to live, though, with that threat as a public figure, is that a kind of an unnerving experience?
Never think about it.
You never think of it?
Never. My security people just upbraid me all the time. My family upbraids me all the time. But I go back and forth like I want to. I never think about it. Walk into crowds, walk in parades, never really think about it. And I guess that's a blessing, although it could be a very dangerous thing.
Let's go on now to surely the most pleasant thing in your life. Our new First Lady, whom I've had the pleasure of meeting, gets high marks from everybody. I mean, even people who would like to hang Edwin Edwards brag and rave about her. What did you find in her? What characters appeal to you that she possesses?
Well, she's, of course, a nurse, and she has a compassion for people. She comes from a good Cajun family in the Gonzales area. Her last name is Picou. She is an unbelievable person. She can speak to the President of the United States or to the inmates that work at the mansion with the same dignity and respect and deference, and I admire that in her. She has a capacity to make everybody feel welcome and feel like she wants to be a part of what they're doing, and there's just something about her that's just difficult to explain, but she certainly has made a difference in my life, and I'm very, very grateful that she has consented to marry me.
So there's tranquility within you?
Oh, absolutely, and I feel very comfortable with my life, comfortable with her. We thought, you know, I discussed it with her over a 4-year period of time as to whether or not she wanted to marry a person my age, because I thought someday she might want to have a family. But she's very close to one of her nieces and one of her nephews, and it's kind of godmother to them, I guess, for want of a better expression. Spends a lot of time with them, and she has accepted the fact that at least during our relationship, there will be no family, and she understands that. But she certainly would make a fine mother, and I'll tell you what, we're depriving some unknown or unnamed child of a wonderful mother, and maybe someday after I'm gone, she'll still be young enough to consider that.
Governor, you're an interesting combination, and I don't know why it's just hitting me now. You're a combination of total realist and dreamer.
That's correct. That is absolutely correct. I'm an absolute realist, yet I dream on occasions, and I have ideas of grandeur. I escape from reality. I dream of things that are impossible, but still would like to see them happen. I fantasize about what could be if people had a common decency and respect for each other. And I often dream of a better world, and I don't see it coming, to be honest with you.
What's Edwin Edwards' best personal character? Then I'm going to ask you your worst, so better make the good one strong. Yeah.
My best personal character, I think, honestly, is being able to see other people in their shoes, understanding where they come from, seeing the difference, and not saying, well, you're different from me, you think differently, you have a different religion, this, that, therefore I don't like you or I'm suspicious of you. I have a capacity, and I say this with a great deal of admiration for myself, I have a capacity to relate to everybody. And in spite of the fact that I've been in excellent health all my life, I know what it's like for people to be in pain or suffering or concerned about their physical condition, and that's why I spent so much of my time addressing that problem.
Now, what would you say is in other words, what if you could remove from Edwin Edwards' character a quality, surgically, without pain, what would you remove?
Impatience.
Impatience.
I'm just too impatient. That's a facet of Candy that I admire very much. She can sit down and talk at length with anybody. I never have more than as you know, because you and I have talked a lot of times, more than a 30-second telephone conversation. Get it over with, hang up, go to something else. I can't sit by a telephone and wait for the secretary to answer it. If it rings, I pick it up. I am impatient with legislators whom I cannot get to understand the needs, the concern, the problems of people who are not here in the Capitol, beating on them and offering them campaign contributions in the next campaign. I'm very, very impatient with the unwillingness of people to change.
How difficult would it be for Edwin Edwards to adjust to not being governor of this state? You've had the job for so very long.
Impossible. I'm going to do it, but I'll never adjust. It's just going to be impossible. I know that the 8 years that I was out of office, I played governor in a lot of respects. The press credited me with doing things that I really hadn't done, but I was very watchful of what was happening. I enjoyed the exchange of ideas and the clash of good minds. And I don't suppose that I'll ever be able to just wake up and not wonder what's happening in the mansion.
You've won so many races. I think actually 11 offices, plus all the primaries.
I've been on the ballot 25 times, including open primaries, general elections, and uncontested elections. And in all but one, the 1987 election, I came out first. And that's an enviable record, and I'm very proud of it. I'm also very humbled by it, and it makes me feel that in spite of all the criticism that I've taken and the fact that there have always been a number of people who dislike me for my political agenda, at least there have been a majority of people on all those occasions who felt like I had something to offer.
That 87 race, that only time, that blot on that impeccable record, did that hurt very much?
It hurt very much because it was such a fraud. You know, I would have not minded it at all if some legitimate person with a legitimate agenda had gotten involved in the race, but it was such a fraudulent race. The newspapers and Governor Roma, candidate Roma, convinced the people of so many things that actually didn't happen. Even on the night that I conceded to him, he was still bragging about no more taxes, and yet a week after he became governor, he started raising taxes and did it more times than any governor in the history of our state. And what had hurt me the most was that I had been bested by a person with an agenda that was really fraudulent, but it was perpetuated and amplified by the newspapers and their desire to hurt me and to get rid of me. And they sold the people of this state a bill of goods, and that really bothered me. But I said on the night that I conceded, before very long, you're going to find out what has happened to you, and you're going to want Edwin Edwards back. And 4 years later, Buddy Romer got less than 25% of the vote. He's the only governor, incumbent governor, who didn't even make the runoff in a governor's election.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, the governor is not without opinions or the total willingness to share them. Please stay tuned, because we're going to come back with part 2, the governmental side, the public side of Governor Edwards. Thank you so much.
Louisiana Legends is made possible by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Louisiana. This important program series enables us to discover, through the accomplishments of our fellow Louisianians, the unique character of a state so proudly served by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Louisiana for 60 years.